We've got Kramer coming over to produce us so that we can show off to our specialist friends. Go down to the Falcon in Camden and say, I'll have a pint for myself and a pint for the MC5. There you go.
Okay, Brother Clive.
Are
you ready?
There.
Are you ready? Are you ready, Brother Clive? Are you ready? Are you ready to make a choice? To make a choice. Are you gonna do this episode of Film Crack with me? You got 5 seconds to decide, Clive. You got 5 seconds to make this choice.
I see you on next time. Bye. Haha! I jest, of course. It's my pleasure, Nick, to talk to music docs in this edition of Film Crack. Two music docs that have kind of well, one is genuinely unavailable in a legit way,
which I don't totally understand.
No, and then the other one I feel has did get good reviews, but when it came out, but has sort of kind of been slightly forgotten about, I think, and is definitely worth talking about. So first out the gate is 2002's MC5, a true testimonial, which I remember watching kind of when it was about.
Me too.
First, and then assumed, oh well, that'll come out at some point. And then, as far as I know, it never did. Right? It may have had some festival dates or something early on, but I'm a bit confused as to why this film's kind of.
I'm trying to figure out how I saw it then. Like, if it wasn't released on DVD, or like, was it just like, did somebody just have a pirated copy of it that was going around really early on places like Pirate Bay and stuff? Like,
I think that's what it was. I think it kind of, it leaked.
Okay.
And I think we must have been aware that it was having some kind of distribution problem or something, so jumped on it and then assumed it would sort itself out at some point, and then it didn't, right? So so it's interesting to watch because it's 2002, so it's standard definition. There's no HD version as far as I know. But also, what's kind of, I noticed this has become increasingly refreshing in the days of the Netflix documentary, is almost any documentary that you watch now prior to the kind of standardized way of doing docs now. There's something really refreshing about seeing something, even if it's a bit scrappy, and people are like talking on actual real locations. And there's a variety to the visual style. Like, I'd much rather watch, even if it's shoddy, I'd much rather look at that than the standard, what's become the standardized, someone extreme focus foreground, soft focus background, stay on camera for one person just long enough so they shed a tear and say something like, just give me a minute. Cut to exterior drone shot of park or house, or for no reason to do with anything at all, but you gotta have a drone shot in there. It's, I don't know, it's weird. I think it works in a subliminal, because a lot of those Netflix documentaries have quite interesting like subject matter. But number one, they decide, should we tell this in an hour and a half? I know, let's stretch it out to 80 episodes or something. That, and like I said, that kind of standard. So it's weird, like on a subliminal level, it's like you've learned the rhythm of modern documentaries, so it doesn't surprise you. You kind of almost know exactly what the next edit point is going to be.
I'll tell you what else I really like about this, and I didn't realize it until now you brought this up, because there's another thing, and this predates the Netflix documentary, but it is very much a thing of the 2000s documentary. At no point did I have to see Bono's fucking face and have him appear with his like Mr. Rent-A-Quote, I have something to say about this, or Henry Rollins, or really any of
Henry
those.
Rollins is a real surprise.
Given that his poor brother famously covered Kick Out the Jams motherfuckers on the, I mean, if we're gonna do like sad mea culpas, I think the first time I ever heard an MC5 song was on the soundtrack to Pump Up the Volume.
Oh, okay.
As a teenager, right?
Although that's a surprisingly, from memory, that's a surprisingly interesting soundtrack in parts for a major release film.
Christian Slater movie of that. Yeah, I mean, but what I feel like they often wouldn't go with the standard version. So, for example, it doesn't have the Leonard Cohen version of that everybody knows song that plays repeatedly in the film. There's like it's Concrete Blonde's cover of it, even though that's not in the movie. And the same goes for the MC5's Kick Out the Jams. It's not the one from MC5. It's Rollins' cover of it.
Right. You mean?
But
you mean that song? Everybody knows this is the only song I ever did that was any good.
That's the one.
Everybody knows that I am boring. Sing a song. Right?
Yes, from Montreal, Canada.
Right.
But yeah. Anyway, so I was pleased that like really they did limit the interviewees to people who were in the band or very closely connected with the band. So we do get one of my favorite interviewees of all time, Danny Fields, who I'm always overjoyed to see.
Well, there's a whole doc as well, isn't it? Danny Says. I don't know if you ever watched that one.
I think I have, yes.
Yeah.
But unsurprisingly, he shows up in a lot of other documentaries that I'm interested in because he really is, you know, yeah. I mean, well, I guess we'll get to it when we get to it. But anyway, but yeah, so it's most of the MC5 who are alive. Obviously, it's missing Fred Sonic Smith, who had passed away at the time that the documentary was made, and it's missing Rob Tyner, who had also passed away. So it's not quite.
John Sinclair, not a member of the band, but kind of almost a member of the band.
Yes.
For a while there, because of course he's also bought the farm a long time ago. But
he's in the document. He's interviewed a lot.
It's an archive. It's an archive interview, though, right?
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure because some of it's more contemporary looking.
Yeah. No. It's not
just the old footage of him, like with
the Rob Tynan, and not the French, like the French TV footage, right? Where he's dubbed over in French. But yeah, so MC5, for those who don't know, I guess, kind of. I mean, I don't know where you stand on MC. I'm not the world's biggest MC5 fan. Like, I think I appreciate them more than I listen to their records. Let's put it that way. I think they're a good band, but I feel as if they were probably a band you needed to see live to fully appreciate. They look as if they would have been a phenomenal live band.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. I do. They bring it up in the documentary. I do think it would have been, so if you know their first album,
which is a live album.
Yeah. Like the first 3 songs on that album it's a really strong album opening set. After that, it gets more hit and miss across the rest of it. But I do think it was a great kind of like audience, whatever you want to call it, like bait and switch kind of thing. So they would have Wayne Kramer come out and sing Ramblin' Rose first, and then introduce Rob Tyner as this almost like surprise, like, holy shit, who's this heavy set man with this massive fucking afro screaming at the top of his lungs? He was like a special effect.
Wayne Kramer's doing Ramblin' Rose sounds a lot like you doing female insect noises.
It does. It does actually.
I was imagining you. Oh, I'm not a caterpillar.
That's pretty much. You're right on. Yeah, totally. And I didn't realize he looked a lot like Rick Moranis when he was younger. He's kind of aged out of it, but like some of those pictures of him, like
Rick Moranis now driving
yes,
around in his GTO, and I suppose the other thing that's a bit difficult to get your head around with as well is they're very specific. There's a very specific demographic from that kind of hippie era of like not non-hippies, maybe it's, you know, that hippie adjacent kind of but they've also got this kind of real heavy love of America the way it should be kind of thing. So all the fucking stars and stripes everywhere is a little hard to take as well, even though it's coming from a good place. You know, it's very different from you know, it's not like a MAGA thing.
No, at all.
Although I wouldn't be surprised.
But they are from Detroit, right? So that's yeah. There's that Michigan.
So there's that thing which is and plus, you know, the whole, you know, we're gonna testify today and all that stuff is like, I don't know, that stuff only goes
the white man's blues stuff.
The
white man's blues stuff is kind of weird, like that John Lee Hooker kind of cribbing. But you know, it's funny. So like as a teenager, I was you know, I very much into into political punk, right? I mean, that was my jam for a long time, right? It was all about Crass and the Dead Kennedys, and the harder line it was, the more right on it was, the more excited I was. And then I didn't really discover the MC5 until I was more in my 20s, and I discovered them around the same time as I discovered the Stooges. And I remember having this conversation with my friend Kevin where I said, yeah, it's really weird for me, but I find the Stooges much easier to take than the MC5, even though for some reason the MC5 is exactly doing the kind of thing that I would have thought was awesome when I was 17, 18, 19. But at whatever, 23, the Stooges completely spoke to some other primal part of my soul, because there wasn't all that other baggage. It was just pure,
and with the MC5, it's a bit one note as well. Is it like I said, I imagine if you'd gone to a live event, it would have been phenomenal, right? But listening and it gets a little, I don't know, it gets a little tiresome. Like a whole MC5 album, I find more exhausting than energizing.
Right.
You see what I mean?
I will say, you know, I mean, maybe we should just talk a little bit more about the whatever, the situation, the milieu of like what was going on, right? So, you know, before we unpack a little bit more about how we feel about, because I actually I really like Fred Sonic Smith's next band, Sonic's Rendezvous Band. Specifically the song City Slang, which I think is one of the greatest fucking unknown rock songs of all time. It's like an 11-minute long ass kicker of a song that's like pure raw energy. But like, I mean, like maybe one of the things that was slightly disappointing about this documentary to me was that it avoided some of the stuff that's in this book, right? Which I still think this is one of the few books I've read maybe 4 times, 5 times.
It is a good book. I can imagine reading that again, actually, just for fun in the bath.
Yeah, I do it about every 5 years. I'll go back and reread it, and it's always a pleasure. But in a way, in some ways, like there's stuff that's mentioned. It's like there's a really interesting chunk in this about when they went to New York and were basically playing some sort of show for Billy Graham, but it was invaded by like there was this whole thing where like the motherfuckers, right, who were like that Lower East Side, like, you know, even more further out there kind of version of the White Panthers kind of a thing. They they kind of like it just turned into a huge riot, and it was I wonder why they didn't talk about that, because it was a really interesting kind of crazy fucking funny awful thing that's mentioned in this book. You know, but anyway, but yeah, I mean, it is a weird thing. Like, they start out just as a kind of like they're like a rock and roll band, and then they sort of get co-opted, right, and adopted by John Sinclair, who sort of uses them as a vanguard for his like dope, guns and fucking in the streets, White Panther Party thing. And they end up moving to Ann Arbor, Michigan from Detroit when things get kind of heavy, and then they live in this big house where all the women apparently just like wear drab dresses and scrub the floors, and the men eat at giant tables wearing like Viking helmet kind of things.
Stuff like that. It's funny. You imagine if they were going to make a doc. No, like I'd quite like to hear from the other side in a way. Like I'm not. I mean, for all their revolutionary talk, my guess is these were probably some of the biggest chauvinist pigs.
Oh, absolutely.
Imagine, right? Like,
and again, and Wayne Kramer is really honest about it in here, but I felt like they kind of soft sell it a bit in the documentary.
Yeah. So it's funny. I remember seeing this doc and kind of thinking, oh, good, someone's done MC5 doc, because they deserve. Like I said, even though I might not be the world's hugest fan, I do like their music, and they were certainly important, and I really like my favorite MC5 song is "Looking at You." Actually, I think on the record,
my Poison.
Poison is also good. Yes,
but very specifically, like
is that on High Time?
Yeah, and the album version is good. But I have a rehearsals tape that somebody gave me at some point, and for me, the version on that rehearsals thing is like fucking pure magic.
Okay, I'll have to check that. Yeah, and that's another thing they have in common with the Stooges. Actually, is sometimes it's non-official versions that
are far more energy and more driving force.
Yeah.
If I would say, if anything, that second album to me is the one where I'm just like, okay, like it's very standard rock and roll.
Back in the USA.
Back in the USA.
Yeah.
Just like,
I mean, it opens with that really kind of awful version of Tutti Frutti. Like
exactly.
Yeah. No, but that's what I mean. They're kind of they didn't like the Sonics. Sorry, the Stooges. Sonics is a different thing again. But the Stooges is they seem to be a bit more about tapping that raw power, right, which kind of comes and goes in the MC5's recording, which is why, again, it's the whole live. But I'm imagining if you went to see them live, there would have been a whole lot more of that, right? There would have been a lot more of an experimental kind of component of the performance. So I remember seeing this, and I thought, oh, good, someone's done an MC5. And then coming back to it now, I was slightly disappointed, I think, just because, coming in with slightly higher hopes. I suppose it is more or less the MC5 story. There's no massive omissions or anything, but like you said, they seem to have some of the more colorful stuff. See, it's a little bit surface level Cliff Notes, isn't it?
Yeah, and I do think obviously it's hurt by the fact that we don't really get
dead.
I really do think that that's a big problem. Unfortunately, that they couldn't do anything about it, right? But not having Rob Tyner and not having Fred Sonic Smith, who really in some ways are, they're all important, but like they are kind of, and Wayne kind of like that is the beginning. That's the genesis of the band, right?
Yeah, plus as well, because Wayne Kramer's quite the he's quite the raconteur and a very dominant figure, so he kind of takes over to a certain extent. It's very much as Wayne Kramer's MC5, a true testimonial. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. And there's an element of he's clearly told these stories many times, including in that book I just
which is why he could be bothered to tell the long ones again, maybe.
Yeah, he told them 8 million times. But I think, but you know, there's a few things that in it that I did like. Like I did the story about how basically Rob and Fred had that punch out in the parking lot at the very beginning of the band, really, you know, and that was kind of how it forged. It seemed very, I mean, it could be exaggerated or whatever, but it seemed very Detroit.
Oh yeah, I mean they're scrappers. Right? There's like that quite amusing anecdote about when they're on tour with Cream and they keep beating them up. I quite like that. Although I suspect they might not have. They might have stayed away from Ginger Baker because he gives as good as he gets.
Oh yeah,
I can't imagine him backing off from a fight.
No.
Have you seen that doc, by the way? There's a Ginger.
So you know, it's funny. I haven't, but I was talking to again my friend Kevin once, and he was furious at that. And there was a specific part of it. He was just like, it was like, this is everything that's fucking wrong. So like the documentary set up with this guy who was like, basically admits freely, like, I knew nothing about the band and I had no interest. I only discovered them like a week ago, but then I was decided to, I'm going to make a documentary about them.
This is like, okay, Beware Mr. Baker, it's called.
Yes. Yeah. And then this part where they cut to him and he's screaming at Ginger Baker, like, apologize to me, say sorry. And he was just like, this is exactly what's wrong with people, young people today, like that's a thing. It's not just like, yes, he's a crazy old man and fucking let him, but like, no.
I think that bit does follow when it's like the opening part of the doc, right, where the filmmaker goes around, knocks on his door, and Ginger Baker smacks him in the face.
Yes.
Like, yeah.
What do you expect? It's like it's like those, you know, you read about those people who would go and, you know, go to Hazel Adkins and you know, where they you gotta know what you're fucking getting into with these people, right?
Yeah, don't be surprised if GGL Allen takes a crap on your living room floor.
Exactly. Yeah.
But it's the other thing it made me think as well. I don't know if anyone's ever done a very specific. I'd quite like to see, in a way, a doc about, because I think of the MC5 and then the Stooges, and then there's these kind of close links between the Michigan and Cleveland, Ohio, and yes, but also you got like the Fugs, and David Peel and the Lower East Side, and that kind of flip side of hippie proto-punk. I'd quite like to see all that stuff kind of like in one place.
Yes,
I think that would maybe yield some interesting results. As far as I know, I've not seen a Fugs or David. Actually, is there a Fugs documentary? You'd think there would be by now.
Yeah.
But anyway, we are rambling like rambling Rose, and I'm Marjorie the grasshopper.
Yeah. I mean, as I said, you know, I mean, in a way, like any of these things, there's an element of sadness, right, to all of it. Obviously, you know, we have two people who've passed away, and then we have the disintegration of the band. I mean, it is quite a depressing story about their final performance, you know, at the Grand Ballroom or whatever, the place where they had kind of had their great successes, and they just kind of stumble through a set, and then Wayne Kramer just walks off stage halfway through, as Clive has just demonstrated here.
Fuck you, Nick! I'm not doing this anymore.
In order to go basically get high, you know, because he knows it's a farce and they're only there for money, and it's more important to him at that point to go put a spike in his arm.
I suppose this is not the documentary's fault or any of these documentaries' fault. I suppose you watch enough rock docs and the thing is, the story becomes so familiar. Like,
right.
Oh, okay, here we go again.
And how much of that is just Richard Nixon? How much of that is Richard Nixon and the decision to like flood the US with heroin rather than allow people to continue to do their mushrooms and their LSD and their you know, their pot, and be like, no, let's just get everyone hooked on dope, and then, you know, you watch how quickly people don't give a shit about bettering themselves or the revolution when they're strung out, you know.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I suppose the reason we're talking about this more than anything else is the fact that we are slightly confused as to why it isn't out there, and it could be just a timing thing, like we said. It's even forgiving eyes, like, well, actually, you don't count because you only discovered what HD was a week ago.
Yes, this is true.
But even for giving eyes like myself, like, I don't care. Something doesn't have to be, you know, because some people are quite militant about it. I'm never watching anything that isn't HD again, you know. But for me, I'm not. But still, when you look at it is strikingly, the more you are to almost everything being HD, you know, that's released now or re-released or whatever. Something like this does look increasingly fuzzy and amateur, so that could be a thing. But then again, that just needs a remaster, right? If they can go back to the original elements or an upgrade. So yeah, I'm not quite sure why this is.
Okay, this is interesting. So I'm actually on the Wikipedia page right now, and I may have an answer to this question.
Oh, okay. Why didn't I think of it? Just looking at it. Yeah.
So apparently it was shown at film festivals around the world. It got very good reviews. But in April of 2004, Wayne Kramer sued Legler and Thomas. Oh, so yeah, that was another interesting thing. So Dave Thomas is the director of this. I assume that's the same one from Strange Brew, and who was the founder of Wendy's restaurant.
Oh, is that? Whenever I again, this is another thing I forgot to look. When I heard of Dave Thomas, I was wondering, isn't there a Dave Thomas in Periubu, or am I remembering that wrong?
That's far more likely than what I just. Obviously, I did not mean that the founder of Wendy's restaurants or the guy from Strange Brew. No, I don't know who the fuck Dave.
My guess is actually is neither, right?
Yes, probably not. I think it's probably a lot of people called Dave Thomas.
Yep.
But no, anyway, so what happened was Wayne Kramer sued Legler and Thomas. In his suit, Kramer alleged that Legler and Thomas had promised he would be the film's music producer, an assertion that the filmmakers denied. With the lawsuit, distribution of MC5, A True Testimonial, ended, and plans for a DVD release in May were cancelled. In March of 2000 and in March of 2007, the court ruled in favor of Legler and Thomas, and the Court of Appeals upheld the decision on appeal. But nevertheless, MC5, A True Testimonial has not been released on DVD. Although in 2011, the filmmakers began a fundraising campaign to pay for the rights to the band's music. So it may be that they made a music documentary without having secured the rights to the music.
Right. Yes, that'll get you in trouble.
And so it's 2011, that's quite a while ago. So obviously that fundraising campaign to pay for the rights to the band's music maybe didn't pan out.
Yeah, not going well, that campaign. Unless they got a really long, they decided to
yes, yeah.
end it.
Okay. The timeline for reaching that funding goal was spread across 25 years.
Yeah, so okay, so that's probably the reason why then, legal issues. But then again, I'm still surprised that in the interim someone hasn't done another MC5 doc.
Or maybe everyone else was pissed off and it was just more like, if I was in that band, I might be like, oh, fuck this, like everything we touch turns to shit. What's the point? And I don't know how many of them have any of them passed away since then, or I mean, because this was made quite a while
years ago. Yeah. Well, anyway, I mean, yeah, you can't find it if you go looking about online. You can find non-legit releases, which you should feel no shame in, because you don't have any choice. That's the only way you're
going to see it. I will say that I quite liked their bassist, Michael Davis. He seems like real just like chill dude sitting out there in the wilderness somewhere amongst the cacti. Well,
he's the one who was very kind of down on having kind of being co-opted politically by
the
John
rhythm
Lennon.
section.
Yeah,
both the drummer and yeah, the bassist seem to have been like, fuck this, like what, like this, we were like a rock and roll band.
Yeah.
And this whole thing that Rob and Wayne and Fred got into with John Sinclair was nothing to do with us. And
yeah.
Yeah.
And there's two ways you can look at that, right? There, on the one hand, you can argue there's the argument that, you know, the Goldman, you know, if it's not my, can't dance to it, it's not my revolution. So there is that thing about it can be fun as well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But then, of course, the other side of the coin is, well, you know, these are just kind of tourists, you know, protesting and getting involved in riots and stuff for kicks, and kind of forgetting that there's actually a, you know, there's a really important reason, you know, behind all this, and it kind of gets forgotten in the white hot thrill of throwing Molotov cocktails
at their local CIA, which they apparently I don't think the band was directly involved, but I think
no, but
thing,
it's easy to see, especially with a bunch of guys like you said, a real you know, a bunch of kind of street brawlers who would have just ended up in a car factory,
right?
You do wonder if they're in. I don't doubt their sincerity necessarily, but it might be short-lived sincerity until they get bored and move on to something else. Like, oh yeah, there's heroin. That's a lot more fun. Or, you know, whatever.
Right. But I mean, you know, the other thing too is like there is that, like, when you read enough about this kind of the 60s, early 70s, the kind of you know, your Abbie Hoffmans and your Jerry Rubins and you know, and your John Sinclairs, like that there was a, like when the hammer came down from the government, it was always like, yeah, so you know, he got arrested for having like 2 ounces of pot and they gave him 9 years. And
yeah,
like,
John Sinclair, the 10 for 2, right? There was even a, was it in Canada? I can't remember. There was a benefit concert, right? With John Lennon was like the Plastic Ono band headlined it. Because there's actually that's another thing we could have done. There's a documentary film all about that benefit concert.
Okay.
Which I remember reading about in Sectronic magazine, which sounds really interesting. And again, I don't think it got a legit release.
Okay.
I think it's called 10 for 2 benefit for John Sinclair or something. Yeah, he banged up for 10 years for 2 joints. But then again, very much in the school of, well, let's get Al Capone for tax evasion, right? There's a whole load of other stuff behind that, right?
Yes.
And John Sinclair as well is someone I've never quite got my, I don't know why, this is going to be massively unfair sounding, but something about John Sinclair, and I don't, this is a very uneducated, there's just an instinctive.
There's
something really untrustworthy about John Sinclair. Whenever I see him.
Oh, no shit. No,
do you know what I mean? There's
he
like
seems like a scam artist on the make in every way.
Absolutely. You feel the same?
Oh, always. Ever since I think the first thing I ever saw him in was a documentary made in the earlier 80s, and it was all about like, where are the yippies now, you know? And so it had Abbie Hoffman in it, it had John Sinclair, it had some of the up against the wall motherfuckers, you know, from New York, and most interestingly for me, it might have had some of the guys from SDS, you know, the Students for a Democratic Society out in Berkeley, and then it had Jerry Rubin, who had become a yuppie, right? He was in like a 3-piece suit and was like clearly like, you know, like a complete 80s like fucking Patrick Bateman wannabe, and it was like, how did you go from there? At least Abbie Hoffman was like, still
I suppose
a
it
mess,
makes sense. It's the next frontier, right? That's the next adventure, right? Is 80s capitalism, right? I mean, if you're going for the high, right? If that's
all it's about for you, if you don't give a shit about the actual politics, and but
Yeah, I don't know.
It's funny.
I can imagine a really young John Sinclair turning up in a Fabulous Furry Freak Brothers cartoon.
Oh yeah,
having just sold the guys some cat litter for $10 or something like that.
totally.
Entrepreneur rip-off artist before he found politics.
It's funny. I was just thinking when we were talking earlier about like when I described like this idea of like using Rob Tyner almost as like a special effect in some ways, like by having Wayne Kramer come out and do his thing. And then and I immediately made me think of the Dictators, right? And the way that Andy Chernoff and the rest of them used Handsome Dick Manitoba in that exact way. Like they play a few songs and then this again heavy set guy with a massive afro comes out and does his thing. But did you know that Handsome Dick Manitoba was the vocalist for MC5 in the 2000s?
Oh, is that right?
Which makes a certain amount of sense.
Or something. Right.
Yeah. I was like, okay, yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And again, a kind of the Dictators being another good example of like a band who flirted with you know anarchism or politics, but were basically just
just good times
thugs, right?
I really like the Dictators quite a bit. I mean, just there
is there a Dictators doc?
If there isn't, there should be, because there's like the idea of a bunch of Jewish New York guys releasing an album with a song called Master Race Rock on it is just, there's so much to unpack with those guys. And then Back to Africa, which when you actually listen to the song, you're like, oh no, it's not what it seems to be about at all. It's this weird extended joke that's pro whatever. I have a lot of time for the Dictators, and they're another band who I think their first album is like really great, and their second album is like and then their last one is really good.
Okay, I don't know if I got to the last one because I remember that post. I mean, I'm not even that huge a fan of it like you are. I like bits and pieces, but I remember them getting dangerously close to fucking Bruce Springsteen territory.
That middle album is for me rough going. But then I really liked their Return to Form album. They're like DFFD, Dictators Forever, Forever Dictators, that came out in the 2000s. It's maybe their best album.
Okay, I might have to give it a go.
But that's also post Manitoba's Wild Kingdom, which is also a pretty good album, and it's basically the Dictators under another name. It's all the original members. There's a lot of fun on that album as well.
There we go.
We're away from the MC5 now, so maybe we should wrap this up.
But there it is. It's there. It's all right. It's not bad. It's worth a look, I suppose, if you are an MC5 fan.
Plus,
I'm just wondering as well. It probably works as a primer as well if you're just getting into them, as well, I would imagine. Yes,
for sure. And you do get drummer Dennis Thompson holding like some sort of assault rifle in your face, which is slightly disconcerting.
He seems like a very tiresome individual as well. Like good for blurbs and snippets.
Yeah, quotable quotes.
I can't imagine hanging out with him all day. He seems a bit a bit
much.
angry.
He's like hanging out with Hunter S. Thompson on one of Hunter's bad days.
Right. So on we go then to a band which I have a lot more fondness for. If the MC5 is a band that I kind of admire more than I listen to, then that's not the case with the MONKS, and we're talking MONKS, the Transatlantic Feedback. From 2006, a Spanish, German, US doc. So now then, Larry, Roger, Eddie, and Gary. Basically some ex-army dudes who were posted in Germany in the early 60s, from 62 onwards. They were there during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Started, it seems to have started like a covers band more than anything, and became the
Torquays.
Yeah. And then at some point clearly had a psychopath for a manager.
Yeah, this is really interesting. This whole thing about, like, I had assumed it was their thing, but it's clearly
they just seemed like
it's
some
very
demented. Because the thing is, I knew they were ex-army or whatever, and but the thing is, I didn't know the details necessarily before seeing this doc. This isn't the first time I've seen it, but I always assumed that they'd actually seen combat somewhere, had PTSD, and then formed the Monks.
A garage rock noise. But like, I mean, I don't even know how you describe what the fuck the sound of them is. But the only thing that I can think is that it's funny to think that they had no influence on the Stooges. I don't think the Stooges were aware of them. But to me, it's the most proto Stooges thing I've ever heard. Like that intense rhythm section of like just the driving bass and fucking hammering drums.
Yeah, well, that's
and then
more
repetitive.
Velvet Underground drumming has that a little bit as well. I think that kind of very tribal kind of. But it's amazing to me that even now, no one sounds like the Monks.
No,
like almost all other bands of this era, kind of like we mentioned, the Velvet Underground, the Stooges, all these really important bands. You can find bands that have taken bits and pieces from them, right? I can't think of anyone who sounds like the Monks.
The Fall?
Not really. They're not musically, I don't think. Nothing.
No, but I think
the Fall are a lot more. They've got the repetition
maybe.
Thing going, but that tends to extend out more on kind of it's not this kind of 2-3 minutes and done, like relentless kind of assault, and then and plus as well, I mean, Marky Smith will give you a whole lot of stuff to think about, as the Monks have quite limited.
They boil it down in that way.
Yeah.
That I think the best Stooges songs also reduce it, boil it down to this kind of like
the Ramones even, like but somehow they speak volumes with very little, like they've I mean, I don't quite know how it's interesting to see them interviewed in this doc, like you said, as being quite normal.
Oh yeah, totally. Like,
how
you're like, oh,
how did they exist as this unit?
Yeah, well, it really does feel like they were given this very clear direction from these two managers who had this vision, and they were just like, sure, okay, we could do that.
But what's weird about that is, usually when you think of bands that have some kind of calculating like a manager or driving force behind them, or like a Brian Epstein or someone like this. No, hang on. Yeah, that's the Epstein. Yeah, that's the right one.
Yeah. Oh yes. Yeah.
When it's that kind of, it's usually with the commercial in mind, right? Like
it's not the art.
No, but what's weird in this example is it is exactly that. Like, there's no way on earth anyone involved could have thought, right, dress like monks, right? Dress like medieval monks, get the robes, get tonsches, all of you, or I learned the German word, Glatzkopf, and play this fucking,
the world's roughest sounding garage rock noise,
angular kind of repetitive noise rock, but with these kind of almost feel goody weird, naive lyrics that sound like I tell you what, he sounds a little bit like, actually, a little bit sometimes. He sounds like a little proto Daniel Johnson or something like that.
Right.
I mean, there's that song. I can't remember what it's called, but there's that song that's just and hey, what's that girl you got over there? Yeah. She's a nice looking girl. Like that song's just fucking insane. Like if you think about it, like who came up with that? Like, I have got a great idea for a song. But at the same time, they're not weirdy beardy kind of
no.
In a way it's quite not clean cut exactly, but it's I don't know.
No, I agree.
Nothing like the Monks, right?
It's not like it's right. It's not like the Fugs, and it's not like, and it's not jokey, although it's funny. Yeah, but it's not gag music. It's not novelty music, because there's something too intense, too driving, too forceful about the music, because they're fucking earworms. Like, every time I make the mistake of listening to the album a couple of times in the same week, the rest of the week I'm just like in the shower going like dun da 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 dun da da. It just like repeats over and over.
Yeah, you could listen to those songs on repeat, and you would, I mean, like a song like the Cuckoo one, Cuckoo, there's something like so brain damaged about the whole thing.
But actually, it's funny. I mean, again,
normal. It's
like you said, you can pluck these little things, because like I do think that almost like nursery rhyme quality about them is something that the Ramones do as well. But I don't think influenced by the Monks. I don't know that anyone seems to have known about them outside of Germany. And then this re-release that comes years later, like Henry Rollins, I think, of all people, was the one who released that album again.
Black Mountain. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, so to back to the doc, we got the story of basically how they were these ex-army. They formed a band while they were still, in like the commissary or something, became this cover, and then got some management. That
clearly the Andy Warhols of of Germany, who are like, yes, we have a plan for you. Africola? What the fuck was that? Because unfortunately, part of the documentary is just in German without subs, right? And so I was really like, I wanted to know more.
You have subs.
Okay. Right. Okay, well, maybe I will, because I'm quite interested to know what all that malarkey about Africola was.
Oh, this is Charles Wilp. Yeah, I think, I wasn't exactly sure, because this entire section is just, but Charles Wilp, who is some sort of weird polymath conductor, photographer, artist, guy. I'm not sure what his connection to the Monks
was exactly.
But the Africola, commercial is quite the thing. The tagline: "Sexy mini superflower pop-up cola." Yes.
But another thing I will say that blew me away was, and because I hadn't seen that much footage of them playing, but there's this moment where they're all on the ground kneeling over this guitar, all of them playing it at the same time with this, and I was just like, it's so what you would see in Japan like 25 years later at like some noise show, and I'm like, this is happening when? This is happening in like 65, 64, like.
I was wondering about some of that because I was wondering what they would be like live as well, because later on they do mention about when they go on tour, they have this thing about like, so they continue they still do the covers and things, but then they integrate. So it sounds as if they didn't do full-on
Monks
show, because that would have been too much for so they kind of a weird mix. But obviously at some point they were segue to these experimental like noise sections, but as far as I know, that hasn't been recorded or
like a full set of what they would have done. But I mean, it was interesting too, like, because the band, they do seem uncomfortable in some ways, because they were just a bunch of like straight ahead pop guys, and then they said, oh, sometimes depending on where we were, the audience was really not into it, and we were just out there grinding through these terrifying.
The footage of them on, you know, like a Music Aladdin Club or some German like pop show is fucking priceless, man. They're just up there, and yeah, there's some like, you know, recruited teens up the front, kind of frigging along, like, and then if behind them you see like a sea of faces, like, huh? Like, what's going on? Who are these weird people? And yeah, I like the fact that they are playing this weird ass music, but some occasionally, you know, they're doing like these like gestures, like they're the Beatles or something.
Yes, you're right.
The disconnect is.
Gary especially has this real like thing going on, which is awesome, because then what he's singing, because that's the other thing, like, I mean, that's a place where, again, I do make that Stooges connection of like, we're gonna take this music, but I'm not gonna sing about how much I love you, baby. I'm gonna sing about how much I hate you, baby. And that's something that you still don't see that much, I don't think, prior to that more established proto-punk stuff, you know.
Well, what's amazing to me as well, though, is the sound is so singular. Like, not that they ever did turn up on one of these comps, but they wouldn't fit. Like, they wouldn't fit on like
even on Nuggets either. No, you're right.
It's like
it's not psychedelic enough. It's not psychedelic enough. It's too It's just I mean, you know, I mean, it has elements of a little bit of the energy of like some of the other, of like the Sonics, who you mentioned before. You know, like some of that just forceful. I mean, the Sonics, I guess, also were doing that kind of like meaner sounding.
Like they at least fit into what you think a rock band should be, right?
Yes. I doubt even they were all on all fours down on top of a guitar doing whatever the fuck they're doing. That I was just like, oh my god, that's so awesome. That's, again, it's kind of shit we would see at like All Tomorrow's parties, you know, like you know, in Tokyo in whatever it was, like 2009 or whatever, you know. It just like, it doesn't seem like it shouldn't be how, like, there's something, they're out of place, they're out of time. And then they're such normal, sweet guys, you know, particularly, I don't know which one it is, but the one who just seems so like happy to be alive and not to be living on the streets. So anyway, as I was saying, there's you know, and then just he's so kind of happy to finally have this chance to play in the States, right? Because you realize that the Monks, although they're all Americans, had never actually played in the US before this reunion concert.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think what I was surprised at watching that I didn't really think of. So I knew that they more or less you know, were in obscurity when they, you know, other than some people in Germany who were lucky enough to, including interviewed is Hans Joachim Oehmler from Faust.
Yes.
So I suppose if you were going to argue about people who were influenced, I suppose, it would have been the Krautrock guys, right? They would have been the only people who would have heard,
seen it, or totally.
But still, they don't, you know, don't sound like this. Noi don't even sound like this. I think they just took the notion that you can sound more experimental, right? But none of those bands sound anything like this, right? But it's interesting. So you know but the thing I think what you forget again, because you learn that they weren't just these kind of dudes who were being wantonly weird and strange. I mean, they actually kind of took it semi-seriously that they might actually, you know, be, you know, like what do they call themselves? The anti-Beatles. Because at some point they're playing those same Hamburg places. And what was kind of sad is of course they were actually crushed when they ended up not making it and having to go back to Civvy Street in the US, right? Like, you know, there actually they talk about, you know, it's actually, you know, it wasn't just, we, you know, that was fun. They were like, oh, fuck, you know. And then, it took until, 30 years later for a lot of people to discover them. and yeah, and you can tell it's great actually. It is one of those rare examples, and they talk about it as well a little bit about how, you know, by and large, most bands that, you know, most bands that have disbanded at some point, you should probably stay that way. But this is one of those few examples where I'm really pleased that they had the reunion.
Oh yeah,
gig.
A victory lap.
The footage of it is fantastic. Like they're really
well
having fun.
Yeah, no,
yeah,
it's awesome, and it's weird too who shows up at this.
Yeah,
at
John
this
Spencer,
show.
for
John
example.
Spencer's there, and Janice Porridge, whoever you say their name, you know, is there
Was
as
he
well.
there? Is he?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Ah, yes, there was a guy who looked like it, and Byron Colley as well. Still writing in the pages of the Wire magazine. I read his column monthly. He's still actually. I like. I don't know if you ever read Byron Colley stuff, but he's like, yeah, he's still listening to the most obscure, you know, lathe cut one-sided 7 inches of cassettes that people are sending him, and really enthusing about it still, right? Cool. In his own kind of unique way. So yeah, he's always a good place to, you know, if you're feeling a little floundering about like, oh, I don't know what's good out there now,
right,
his column is often a good place to start, right?
Okay, cool.
I always like, I like people who go so deep into something that the obscure becomes like for him, I would imagine, like the Monks are like the Beatles.
Yes, yes.
I like when your worldview is that off kilter, that you assume that everyone, you know, everyone, because no, people don't know the Monks. In fact, you play the Monks to people who are not ready for it now, and they'll give you weird looks.
Yes. Oh yeah, yeah.
What the fuck is this? Because it doesn't quite fit.
Or they'll do what I did in your car driving around in Tokyo, and I'll be like, who the fuck is this?
Yeah.
Why don't I already know about this?
Yeah, no, we were driving around and I had to push your head all the way back down. You were so surprised.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I lost my rhythm.
I never did. I had to buy a new. I couldn't replace those trousers after you gagged on them.
Sorry.
But you know, that's just one of many trousers lost to your poor reflexes.
Just spat all over my fucking screen. But anyway, it took much like the anecdote you were talking about.
Think of my poor cock.
But no, I mean, really, you're right. You're right. I mean, you reminded me just briefly of a story that I can't remember who it was. It was quite a while ago, but my mate Travis, maybe he had somebody over at the house or something like that, and this person was like looking at his CD collection and just being like, I don't know any of these. You know what I mean? Like, it was just that moment of like being like, what the fuck is all of this? And you know, Travis was always my friend who was that much further, you know, aware of. Well, he's the one who rather famously broke up with a girlfriend because he asked her to go buy him a UFO or Die album, and she came back with an album by UFO and an album by Die, and he was like, "We're through." Which is not entirely true, but that's the way I like to
buy an UFO or Die. That seems like a strange thing to do. Like, have you ever sent someone else out to buy a record for you? Like,
no.
Like such a you've got to be careful with that stuff, right?
Right. Well, clearly in this case.
Yeah.
But anyway, no. But yeah, you do find, or you know, you could hand your iPod or whatever over to your MP3 player to somebody, and they could be. I would imagine that too. Like, there'd be a lot on mine, even that people would be like, "What is any of this?" And they'd be like, "Oh, okay. Well, there's you've got the Rolling Stones Hot Rocks album. I know what that is." But you wouldn't even have those footholds in Tavis's record collection. Yeah.
So back to the Monks here. So Also quite amusing that when they were playing in their German days, I quite like the story about apparently Tony Sheridan fucking hated them, just like screaming at them, which I kind of found quite. Yeah, I mean, to have seen the Monks, that's Time Machine stuff, isn't it? To go see the Monks playing the Ratkeller or something.
Yeah. The Star Club in Hamburg or whatever. Yeah, fuck.
Supported by the Ruttles, of course. That would have been the dream.
Like, yeah.
Right. No, I mean the Monks. I mean, if you are not familiar with the Monks, do so immediately. And actually, I would say this doc does work. It's one of those docs that's nicely balanced. Like, long-time fans will
get tons out of it.
Really enjoy finally learning more about these people. But if you've never heard the Monks before and you're inclined towards interesting music, then I'd say it works as a pretty good price. The only thing I would say, this isn't a negative at all. It's actually something that interested me. I was wondering, because I looked on, because as far as I know, you know, Black Monk Time has been reissued, obviously, and as far as I know, it's just the album. I don't know of any reissues with like demo versions or
B-sides or like.
But some of the versions of the songs played in this are quite different, and I was like,
hang on,
where's this stuff from? Because I would like to have it and own it. But I don't know what that's all about, if it's exclusive, because this film actually did have, now that I remember, when it first came out, there was an accompanying soundtrack CD. So I'm wondering if it might be on there.
Okay.
Stuff might be on there. I think, am I remembering that right? I think there might have been. And it did lead to, there was that tribute album as well, right? Silver Monk Time, which did have The Fall on it, doing Day. And some other interesting cover versions. But yeah, they are one of the ultimate cult bands, really, I think, where we're kind of still waiting for the imitators. Maybe, I don't know, maybe there are, but I don't think I've ever heard anything that makes me think, these guys clearly love the Monks, you know. Inimitable, is that the word? I guess.
I think that is the word. Yeah. No, I think it was a very special alchemy, and then I'm just fascinated by these two, you know, German art folks who were like had this singular vision, like we want this, and right down to the idea that
and Carl and Charles Wilp, right?
Yeah, and that this idea that they even created like a manifesto and a list of rules for, like, you must always be a monk, you must never be a Torquay, like, you know, in the streets you are a monk, you know.
I mean, if that's the thing, is those guys, there's stuff at the end of them, they didn't talk, right? I could easily watch, if you managed to get those guys to talk, I could easily watch another
entire documentary. Yeah,
I would be fascinated. I mean, my guess is they're like futurists or something, right? Who got dabbled in the pop industry briefly, and also worth mentioning, I forgot to mention as well, there's stories of them playing with Hendrix as well.
Yes.
Imagine that. You imagine like rocking up to a club in Hamburg and seeing fucking
Jimi Hendrix and the
Monks. Like, what?
And I liked that he clearly he got to some degree like, yeah, okay, you guys are also very out there, because just that noisier side of things, right?
But I mean, we could just gabble on all day, but the Monks this doc is very good. Watch it. That's it.
And get the album.
Yes,
get yourself a copy of Black Monk Time.
Africola. Because, Nick, it's sexy mini superflower pop-up cola.
That sounds das ist gut, Clive. Das ist
very good.